So many books, especially the YA books that I've read, have this specific underlying trope that's not exactly like an enemies to lovers or a found family trope, but it has this underlying message that the book starts with a person having a problem, then it ends with that person being found and that problem being relieved of them. And almost every book, in almost every time, even in media, TV shows, it's never by the person themselves. It's always by somebody else. It kind of gives to my young brain when I was young and I was reading many books, it gave me the idea that you cannot ever really save yourself. It has to be acknowledged by someone else. Someone else has to save you for it to be valid. And I think that kind of messed up my head because I grew up thinking in the lines of these novels. So many of the books I read teach, of course, how you be a good person, especially for young kids. But it always seems to be this trope, or it's very prevalent in media today, that the main character or the person that the author tries to get you to identify with is this almighty great person, like they can't do any wrong. And recently there's been a resurrection of like a realistic character in media because people want to relate, but for a long time I always read the same thing, which was there's this really good person who is kind and selfless and does everything for everyone, but they always have a issue. I call it the problem. They have the problem. In every novel, there's the problem for someone. They have something either internally or externally that is bothering them and that kind of messes them up, but they never talk about it. It's never really validated until somebody else finds out about that problem. The main character cannot validate it themselves. It has to be somebody else who finds it, sees the real you, and then releases you of it. It's like you gotta have a hero in the story. You gotta have someone who comes along and finds you and lifts you up. To me, I never saw it as the main character. More often, I saw that any character who I ever complained about their problems or set specific boundaries in media is considered the morally gray character. They're not considered the good character, because to be considered good, you have to be like perfect. Often when I was growing up, I started thinking, well, you can't really talk about your problems because they don't do that in the books. They always keep it to themselves until someone else finds it. And it's almost always they never find it purposefully. They find it out accidentally. But reading that trope over and over again in books, so many books, especially books targeted to young readers when your mind is still developing, it like shoves into your crevices of your brain that you cannot face your problems alone because you can't beat them. It has to be someone else who can beat them. I ended up starting to think that any problem I had, I couldn't solve it. I had to wait for someone else to see it and solve it for me. It's the idea that there's gonna be someone to come save you, always. There has to be someone that comes to save you. And that person who comes to save you is what lifts you of that burden. That burden will be gone once that person comes to save you. And almost no media, I feel, that I read when I grew up showed that you saved yourself. It was always someone else. And I understand there's gotta be multiple main characters. There's gotta be the supporting character, but it was never the main character that saved themselves. It kind of just taught over time that eventually someone is gonna see the real you and someone is gonna save you. And it has to be them. It cannot be you. You cannot save yourself because that doesn't make for a good story. It doesn't make for a good fallout and for a good understanding moment. I know that's not realistic, but little me didn't know that. I started thinking, when is someone gonna come save me? When is someone gonna come save me? There's also always the trope that the person always resists being saved. They want to keep it to themselves and they want to suffer in silence because they don't want to bother anybody. And that is, I'm figuring that was very unhealthy for a young mind, because seeing it over and over and then eventually someone comes to save him kind of conditioned you to think, okay, I'm never going to talk about my problems. I'm going to resist the help I get until my hero comes. And you never knew, maybe your hero was there, but you resisted it because you were so used to it. You were conditioned to always resist being helped, because that's what they do in the books. And it really ruined any sort of relationship I had, especially in high school. Resisting any person who got a little too close, because you're waiting for your hero to come to save you and pick you up out of your little pit of darkness and bring you into the light. Anyone who got too close, I shoved out of the way, because that is what the main characters in the books I read did. And it ruined me, because I never let anyone see the real me, because I was so sure that, like the books always did, someone was gonna come and break through my walls, and I wasn't gonna be able to stop it, because that's the storyline. I started seeing life as a storyline. I started seeing it instead of like life where it goes up, down, up, down, up, down, 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 maybe up, down, up, up, up. I started seeing it more like that chart you do in English class, where it's the build-up, the climax, and then the settling down. I was so sure that something was gonna climax. The hero was gonna come at the climax of the story, and then everything would be perfect after that. And that's just not how it works. Amazing to me that I didn't figure that out until maybe I was 18. I didn't figure out that you gotta do it yourself, and it's not selfish for you to set the boundaries and to try to save yourself. Even though the primarily good characters in all the books don't do that. They take every insult, and they're like nice, and they're nice to the people who bully them or whatever, and they never fight back. Until the hero comes, finds them, validates their situation, and then tells them to fight back. Somebody else always has to tell them to fight back. It did not teach me how life worked. The books and the storylines made me think that was how real life worked too, and it's not. Every character who is realistic and sets their boundaries and has their own problems and is selfish sometimes, like humans are, and makes mistakes, they're considered morally gray. Like the most realistic characters are considered morally gray. So when you see it mentioned over and over again that the most realistic characters, someone who you might resonate with, is considered not always good, just in the middle, that kind of hits you. It makes you think, I gotta be doing something wrong, and I'm not a good person, because the good characters in the book, they don't act like this. Reading that over and over again in books just kind of pushed me to see life in a way that was not realistic, and made me wonder all the time what I was doing wrong, because I wasn't like the book characters. I always thought, when is someone gonna come save me? But you gotta pick yourself up and save yourself, because that's not how life works. You gotta pick yourself. You gotta be your own hero. Books are books, and they're not meant to be realistic. They're meant to keep you going, to keep you entertained. And it's crazy, I didn't even think of it like that until I was an adult. Anyway, hero's not always gonna come. You gotta pick yourself up. You gotta do it yourself. Set your boundaries. You're not a morally gray person for being a normal person. You're just a person.